Season 4, Episode 8, the archaic adage of deserving spanking. This episode covers two main topics, and it introduces material deemed potentially offensive or sexual in nature. The first, thanks to our subscriber Andrew Nichols, a design and technology teacher and researcher who informed us of his work to advocate for the provision of personal protective equipment technology or any working party who needs it by the schools. The argument for care makes Alan come unstuck, as such as Alan ever comes undone. And Trajce and Sara are aghast as Alan explains the case he found in the Royal Australian Navy court-martial records. The case involved a 57-year-old male supervising lieutenant commander and a 25-year-old female junior officer. Shut up, stop, Trajce and Sara protest. Hello and welcome to the Why Work podcast series. You are listening to Trace Vitkovsky, Sarah Bazell and Alan Girl.
Queensland Department of Education, Andrew has done a lot of work to try and advocate for that PPE, personal protective equipment, which we've talked about now in context of the hierarchy of controls. Right now, it's down the bottom of the hierarchy of controls, but for his work, in workshops in construction and those sorts of trade training to high school students, it's incredibly important. Again, that's where that question comes up, like how do you consider that rank order that's implied by hierarchy of controls? He's done a lot of work to advocate that PPE, personal protective equipment, is provided to technology teachers. At the time when he was concerned, the teachers were asked to pay for their own work boots, their clothing in workshops, and they work in like wood, metal, plastics lab and kitchens, and yet it's really essential to their job. And I've even seen fitness industries say to the instructors, bring your own mic covers. And I'm like, what? In the world of communicable disease coverage, if you're a direct employee, isn't that something that's really vital to make sure that that's covered for people? And Trajce, you started citing codes and regs to me. So
did we mention that case involving the University of Sunshine Coast and the levy? Now, Alan, off the top of my head, I think the section is...
I was about to go looking. Is it 14?
No, I think it's something like section 12 or something. It's really essentially involved respiratory mask fitting. Unfortunately, the regulator, when it was remitted back for review, there was no outcome. So the university continued with charging for that relevant component of PPE. So I'll get that full citation for Andrew to read, and if anything to contextualise, but there is a provision in the legislation.
Well, you gave me Section 19 of the WHS Act.
Okay, the case is the University of Sunshine Coast against the regulator under the Work Health and Safety Act of 2011, and the relevant provision, the Work Health and Safety Duties and Liabilities, ensuring compliance, and it was a stay with respect to Section 273 of the Work Health and Safety Act. And the Work Health and Safety Act, Section 273, reads, and it's a rarely used section, but that will answer the question for Andrew. Section 273 of the Act provides that a person conducting a business or undertaking must not impose a levy or charge on a worker or permit a levy or charge to be imposed on a worker for anything done or provided in relation to work health and safety. So anything...
Say it again.
Yeah, sure. Section 273 says that a PCBU, a person conducting a business or undertaking, must not impose a levy or charge on a worker or permit a levy or charge to be imposed on a worker for anything done or provided. And provided is the key term here. What does one provide? The relevant equipment, including PPE. That case is really important.
And you've also mentioned Section 19 of the Work Health Safety Act and Section 44 of the Work Health Safety...
of the regulations.
Tell us about that.
So we'll just start from the general principle. So the general principle across all legislation is if an employer requires employees or contractors to wear PPE for reasons of safety, then the employer pays. The
Now-
employees don't pay.
You've just said a really important part, little slide in there is and contractors, because that's where it gets confused, right? By a lot of businesses.
We're excluding, when I say and contractors, I mean people who are workers, who are working for the employer as a contracted worker. I'm not talking about a separate business.
Right.
So if a separate business comes in, that will be the separate business's responsibility to look after their own workers.
Well, I'm going to challenge you. I'm not even going to call them workers. There is a very important word in the Act in section 19.2 specifically, and I'm not reading off the script, others. If you're in control of a workplace, i.e. if you're a PCBU or if you're another PCBU, because remember all these duties are concurrent, if you allow, in my view, if you allow someone to access your site, whether they're contractors, whether they're subcontractors, whether they're others, whether they're individuals, if they are human beings entering a place where...
Not my cat, not my dog.
Not your
human
cat, not your
beings.
dog. That's right. If you're a human being entering and perhaps there isn't any adequate PPE, I think question marks would be raised.
Well, let's just pick up on that. So if you had a large construction site where you've got a principal contractor and you've got contracted businesses, so the principal contractor gets in the carpenters, just to use loose language, and the carpenter contracting company comes in and the workers are not wearing appropriate PPE, the principal contractor would have an obligation to say, hey, stop, you can't work unless you're wearing appropriate PPE. But the principal contractor in that situation would not be obliged to pay for the carpenter's PPE. If the principal contractor was employing workers either as a direct employment arrangement or as a contractual arrangement of some sort, or even as labour hire, then that entity, that PCBU, would have to pay. They have to pay. Now, it gets really tricky because a lot of PCBUs won't do this is steel cap boots.
Steel cap boots.
You say pay.
That's a hot topic.
You say pay, I say provide. If you're the controller, someone's going to have a pair of steel cap boots on if you've allowed that person onto your place.
So it's about the allowing.
So
I think that's
let's
what you're
not
talking about.
This is the part that annoys me about some businesses and some defendants. They get all pedantic with their little checklist to say, oh, look, I'm the PC. I didn't have to pay for those boots. Yes, but you allowed that person to attend the site and the steel beam fell on them. I'm a little bit more macro.
So you're looking at the checks and balances and the system that permitted that.
Yeah, Sarah, if I allow you in here and start doing what you're going to do, like whack a bit of timber or, knock up a bit of this.
That's what I like to do on my Sundays.
Secure a penno. I don't care. As the regulator, I don't particularly care if you say, oh, no, but I'm on the PC. My budget's just to allow these people to wear the steel cap boots. But someone allowed Sarah on there to secure a penno, which is securing a penetration. Someone allowed them.
Sorry, what?
Someone allowed them.
Better choice of words, but the
securing a penno.
The first
using a ram set ran off a penno.
Just stop.
It's so going
Just
south.
Stop. It's going south.
It's going
Don't you know
south.
that's
Our minds are going elsewhere. You need to stop right now.
You're crazy.
Right now.
This is unreal.
Your original question, that was from one of our listeners.
Andrew Nichols.
Yeah, I think that the employer there would have to seek some legal advice about what they're doing, because it sounds as though the employer should be paying for that gear.
Well, it turns out he's, after, blood, sweat, tears, and lots of advocacy, he's now got it covered for the school teachers. So well done, Andrew.
Yes.
And on that note, because he's raised this, we also had feedback from Dylan Matthews about Season 1, Episode 2, the sex during work travel and the light fixture being pulled out of the wall, knocking a woman in the face. So the comment from Dylan was, well, hang on, if you're now using equipment that wasn't designated for its original purpose, who's at fault?
I think you've got to, that's a good point made by Dylan, but you have to look at what the equipment might reasonably be used for.
A light fixture?
A light fixture being used
in a bedhead
as something to hang on to is possibly not reasonably foreseeable, but there's going to be a grey zone there. Now that he's raised that, are we finished with Andrew's question? Okay, let me bring you up to date with a case which has just come to my attention. it's a case in the Defence Force Discipline Appeal Tribunal. And before I think I'll give you the lesson that should be learnt from this case and then tell you about the facts. So I think the lesson that should be learnt in this case is it's just really dangerous to have romantic relationships in the workplace. It's really dangerous.
In the workplace, or you mean forming through the workplace?
And in the workplace.
It's not illegal.
It's not illegal, but if you go down that path, it gets very dangerous, and people come unstuck. And what might be acceptable?
So hang on, Alan, before you go on, are you saying our listeners should not be listening to songs such as Lawyers in Love?
Steer clear of Lawyers in Love. Absolutely steer clear of them.
Just saying.
Yeah, it's not illegal, and it does happen, of course, and it does happen on a perfectly respectable way. But you see lots and lots of cases where people come unstuck, and this is one of these cases where someone's come unstuck very badly.
Go on, tell us.
So,
now
I'm at the edge of my seat. Come on, tell us.
A lieutenant commander in the Royal Australian Navy. He's 57 years old. And he works in the supply area, and I'm not going to name him for obvious reasons. And what had happened was, over the space of a year, he had a junior officer who was 25 years old, and he developed a relationship with her, and he would invite her into his cabin, and he would give her counselling advice. Now
counselling advice.
Well, it got better. It got better. So that counselling advice, he identified times when she hadn't performed as well as she could, and what would happen is he would have her in his cabin, and she would remove her undergarments, the bottom half of her undergarments, and he would put her across his knee and spank her.
Shut up.
Stop.
Stop.
What year was this? This is the thing. Alan always comes up with some surprises.
What?
Please, can you just...
This is a real case.
Hang on.
This is
What century is this?
What's the age of the people
What are we
here?
talking about?
Not very long ago.
Please, tell us
come
what
on,
year.
Not very long ago.
What year? What year?
It was about 10 years ago.
Okay.
Okay, what are the ages of the parties here?
He's 57, she's 25.
And she is submitting to this?
He said in the court case that it was consensual, and he argued very strongly that it was consensual. Okay. And of course she said no, that it wasn't, that because he was a lieutenant commander, she felt that it was necessary for her to take the clothes off and be spanked.
Ascendancy, hierarchy of control.
So we have talked about that sort of thing previously. Now, he ended up being charged with numerous offences.
Yes.
And he did a very stupid thing. When he was under investigation, he tried to destroy his computer, and that didn't go down well. And the reason why he tried to destroy his computer was because he had spanking photos on his computer. Not of the 25-year-old, of other people being spanked.
It's just reflecting spanking is his thing, right?
And as a result of that, he got demoted and dismissed and fined and got a jail sentence.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now, when I
we're going to unpack all of those different forms of punishment, because they're both criminal, quasi-criminal, and both in the civil context. That's the full gamut. That's the full range of deterrence.
Well, it's a military hearing, so
yes.
court-martial. So.
And just, when I help advocate and support younger women who are going for jobs, I hear them say, I'm so fortunate that they're going to accommodate, my parenting obligations, and I say, and they're fortunate to have you too. So it's two ways. And when you're going for an interview, you always say, I should be interviewing the potential employer because I'm adding to their talent pool, right? What are the benefits both ways? Yeah. So I cannot imagine going into an interview and saying, but first, I got to check, are you a spanker? Right.
It's quite. It's almost quite. Yeah.
Well, let's just muse for the moment and say that it was consensual initially for the first spanking. I think the spankee would object to that, but let's just pretend that it was and take his story at its greatest. At that point, why didn't it stop? How did he get past the first spanking into multiple spankings?
Well, those boundaries just, erode.
Dissolve.
And once the permission seems to be granted, his perception, I'm saying, not that she actually wanted that, deserved that, or really felt anything but humiliation through that. But once he's seen that he can get away with it, woohoo! More spanking comes, right?
Well, I haven't given you the full story
Tell
yet.
us,
He
tell us.
also required her to say that she was naughty during the spanking.
See, this is, again, I'm just trying to... I still,
S&M here, I'm getting to
I'm extrapolating here. Hang on. Alan, your caveat, your words of wisdom were first, be careful about, or warnings about falling in love in the workplace. But
and then we got to
And that's just
spanking.
falling in love. We're
Then we
talking
got
about
to the spanking,
this
the
is a slippery
abuse.
slope. What happened? If that's just if this is just the precursor,
You
where else
naughty
can this
girl, spank, right? I've got all kinds of visuals happening. Thanks for that. Keep going.
So before I go on to what the punishment was,
Yes.
Let's just pause and say, look, if he'd met someone on Tinder and they'd had a rollicking good spanking, nothing would come of it, really.
Please don't tell me any type of corporal punishment was inflicted.
Picturing that this could be a person, senior ranking, that likes to be spanked too.
Well,
right?
then therefore,
I wonder.
like I said, corporal punishment shouldn't be imposed.
All right, so let's go.
There's nothing in the court decision that says that he got spanked.
That he asked to be spanked.
Until the end of the case, and then he got
Until the
spanked.
end of the case, okay.
So, and isn't that the irony of it all? As a community, we punish, we spank people because they've been
Deter, yes. Cat of nine
So
tails.
we just do the same
200
thing.
years ago,
Yeah.
and corporal punishment with the ruler or the cane, the cuts, as we used to say in Australia, the cuts, but how extraordinarily perverse.
Keep telling us the story.
So he was court-martialed. He did appeal on some of the counts and continued to argue that it was consensual. And at the court-martial, he was they first demoted him so that he was of a lower rank. Then they dismissed him, imprisoned him for concurrent terms of 12 and 18 months.
Wow.
Now, I don't know how much of that he actually served.
Yeah.
And then he was fined $2,000, and that was in relation to attempt to destroy the service computer. And in relation to the imprisonment, the court determined that no other sentence was appropriate because of the gross abuse of authority and position,
Yes.
which is what you've been talking about.
It's interesting, putting aside the actual act itself, it was just the convergence of desperation, or as a senior ranking person has now gone about with the proverbial sledgehammer to destroy the laptop, has gone about acting in a way of just absolute panic. And this is all within a context of work. So perhaps there is some pearls of wisdom there, Alan, of us saying be careful about relationships in the workplace, because never, I imagine, with this fellow had foreseen not only being court-martialed, but also the things that could have been out of character for an otherwise perhaps upstanding person to now destroy evidence, to fabricate things, to suddenly a slippery slope.
And we talked about this with doctors and psychologists with their patients.
Power.
And maybe a pathway in which you can continue that relationship is if you discontinue the work relationship.
Yes.
So you're no longer in that position of power over that other person.
See, it's
Trish,
yeah.
you can't use spanking.
I mean, you guys shipping me for, and you guys, you're out of the box.
Keep telling us
Anyway,
about
this case is, if it's gripped me, it's going to grip a nation. This is a very important case.
You just got to change your vocabulary.
Because our minds will go in the gutter immediately, all right? No, just
so this is enthralling.
So for a moment, I'm just gonna let you know, my mom listens to these podcasts, and every time I go back, I go, okay, so Mom, when I talked
Be
about
careful.
sneaking out of home, it wasn't that often. I'm like,
You had to apologize to your
I go, yeah. Oh, and I told that story about my brother and the Mercedes, but I just gotta let you know because he's gonna cringe. He doesn't want you to know. She's like, oh, so long ago, but I'm just laughing because I always have to couch it. The other thing she says is, how come, honey, you tell all your personal stuff, but these lawyers, they don't give a little, they don't give away
That's because
anything.
our lives are boring.
No. Just his protect. He's like, how can we know all about you, Sarah? I want to know more from these boys. So I'm just laughing when she said that.
Maybe I'm very good at pretending I am, but I'm just evading it. And now Alan just doesn't say anything. Maybe I
Defense
am.
lawyer says
all right,
nothing.
Sarah's mum, we're going to make this really spicy.
Yeah.
All right,
This edition. This is going out to Sarah's mum.
Sorry, Mum.
This
So
is
tell us more. Tell us
This
more.
is serious
All right,
one.
all right.
Cheers,
Shall I
mate.
move on to the next topic?
You've been listening to Trajce, Sara and Alan, and if you've really enjoyed this show, share this with a friend. Submit your 5-star rating on your favourite podcast streaming service. Keep listening and send in your stories. You can email us at hello@ywork.com.au, and of course sign in to our newsletter. You can head straight to our website at www.ywork.com.au. We can't wait to learn about the trouble you've seen in the workplace. And remember, none of the things we've talked about today should be construed as legal advice or any other type of advice. We're just here to talk about all things related to work, and we hope you enjoyed as much as we do. We love it. See you next time.